Well, it's like the old cliche, kids. Better late than never. It is time for your Sports Frenzy 2.0 weekly podcast here on October the 13th, 2022, hitting about 12 to 15 hours later than normal. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. I am solo this week. If you listen to our short, very special Sports Frenzy episode from a couple days ago, I explained to you why our taping schedule was messed up, why the Conquistador isn't here. We had a concert last night in Indianapolis. The great Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers. If you've never heard of them, if you don't know their music outside of Banditos, yes, Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers is basically the later incarnation of that band, The Refreshments. Phenomenal show. All their albums are great. They hail from Arizona. They are absolutely huge down there in the Southwest. If you get some time, stop listening to You Shook Me All Night Long for the 7,422nd time. Check out Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers on Spotify or wherever you listen to your music. We'll have a review of that show for you coming up next weekend on our weekend edition episode. But it's time to talk sports. And as always, at this time of the year, it's about football, and more football. Segment one is, of course, devoted to the NFL. News of the week in the National Football League, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. The delay in taping this episode actually helped in that there is an additional big story that just broke today involving the Washington Commanders, who are playing tonight, Thursday Night Football, as I tape this, against the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field. Now, the Commanders have not had the best of weeks. They've only won one game. The gambit they took to bring in Carson Wentz doesn't look like it's paying off. It's a franchise that has been mired in mediocrity. They're having the same problem a lot of franchises like the Chicago Bears are having, that they just can't find that franchise quarterback. Now, I have said in the past that, he's a former Bear, part of the championship team, the greatest team of all time, Ron Rivera. I've tried to stick up for him. Of course, he had battle with cancer, well publicized a few years ago, came through that, by all accounts, clean. And great story, great for Ron Rivera. But now over the last year or two, in terms of his leadership, how he's done as a head coach, not so good. I went off on him about how he treated Jack Del Rio and the suppression of free speech in that organization and the penalty they handed out to Jack Del Rio, which I found disgusting and reprehensible. So after that came out, my love for Ron Rivera was tempered a little bit. Well, now in a recent interview, he basically threw Carson Wentz, his quarterback, under the bus. Somebody asked him, you got the Giants at 4-1. You've got the Cowboys at 4-1. You've got the Eagles at 5-0 in your division in the NFC East. What's the difference? Why are you guys struggling at 1-4 where everybody else is succeeding? And he basically said, quarterback. Wow. Now, reports are that he's been trying to kind of backtrack on that, saying that what I meant was Carson Wentz has only been here for 5 weeks of a regular season, whereas Jalen Hurts has been with the Eagles for multiple seasons. Daniel Jones has been with the Giants for multiple seasons. Even Cooper Rush, if you want to count him, instead of Dak Prescott with the Cowboys, has been in that system for multiple seasons. But I think it's kind of a hard comment to backtrack on, because if your quarterback isn't better than Cooper Rush or Daniel Jones, you got a problem. Now, Jalen Hurts is something else. He has developed into now an MVP candidate. I don't think anybody would begrudge a head coach, unless you've got Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, in saying, yeah, that guy might be better than my guy. You really don't want to even say it then, but at least it's a little more understandable. So you've already got those problems snowballing with the Commanders. And then it comes out today, it looks like the NFL might finally be gathering up some steam, some headway in their attempt to finally get rid of Dan Snyder as the owner of the Washington Commanders. Now, we all know the history, hostile work environment. Their front office was implicated with the John Gruden emails that got Gruden fired with the Raiders. But unlike these cowardly, meek and mild NBA owners who admittedly screw up, do stupid things, and the players, the inmates, as I always say, and I am not apologizing, as I don't think in a lot of cases these owners or head coaches should, the inmates run the asylum in the NBA. The players basically are asking for complete and total carte blanche to now force the weak Adam Silver to get rid of owners just because they don't like them or because they made missteps that the players would be able to get away with. But I digress. Going back to the NFL, nobody's saying Dan Snyder is not reprehensible. There's more accumulated over the years negatively about Dan Snyder than probably either one of those NBA owners. Sarver with the Suns, and of course going back a few years to the LA Clippers situation. Again, illegal wiretap, somehow ignored in the state of California. But Dan Snyder now says, or at least the rumors and the reports are, that he had his lawyers hire private investigators to dig up as much dirt as they could on the other NFL owners and Roger Goodell, because he's basically digging in and saying, if you want to get rid of me, you better be ready for me to expose you guys for the hypocrites that you are. And would it shock anybody to find out somebody like Jerry Jones? We already know about the fact he had a child out of wedlock and basically tried to just push money at the problem in order to get rid of it. And somehow the media didn't really talk about it all that much. The NFL didn't really talk about it all that much. This is where, again, as much of a dirtbag as he is, I can understand where Dan Snyder is coming from. The old boys club that is the NFL owners think they can get away with anything and everything. Snyder just happens to be the worst of the bunch. But I'm sure there's plenty of stuff the other ones have done, yes, especially Jerry Jones, where the NFL looks away, especially because the Cowboys are the premier team in terms of revenue, viewership, fan base, America's team. Would it shock anybody if Roger Goodell kind of ignored transgressions on the part of the Cowboys ownership, whereas he comes down hard and heavy on other teams and their owners? Can't wait to see what develops over the next week or two on this story. Moving on to Carolina, we knew this was coming. Everybody had Matt Rule down as the first head coach to be fired this year. Carolina finally pulled the trigger on Matt Rule, ejecting him after a 1-4 start. Baker Mayfield is now hurt, joining Sam Darnold on the bench, on the shelf. PJ Walker will come in and take over starting quarterback duties. Rumors are now they're looking to possibly, maybe, blow the team up, trade Christian McCaffrey, their one viable asset. And on top of all of it, as Dave and I always talk about, crazy, stupid money. Panthers still owe Matt Rule roughly $40 million on his contract. Of course, the Monday night game between the Raiders and the Chiefs was wild. Chiefs win 30-29. A lot of people questioning Josh McDaniels and his decision with about 4.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter to go for two when they could have kicked an extra point to tie the game. Of course, analytics rearing its ugly head again. You gotta go for two in that situation. That's what the numbers geeks say. He went for two, he failed, and he lost the game. But beyond that, the biggest story to come out, unfortunately, of that game was after the game when Vegas star receiver Davante Adams, walking back to the locker room, cameraman walked in his way. Davante Adams, the heat of the frustration, the loss, shoves the cameraman to the ground. You guys know how I feel about our snowflake nation. I can't stand it. People need to toughen up a little bit. I'm not saying we need to go back to the hardcore days of the 40s and the 50s and kids getting whooped with switches and belts. But for the love of God, we've gone too far the other way. The pendulum has swung too far the other way. The overreaction to this whole situation was ridiculous. CBS Sports Network actually, on their crawl, that line at the bottom of your screen that shows scores and news headlines, had to put in there, the cameraman's injuries do not appear to be life-threatening. He got pushed and he fell on his butt. How is he going to have a life-threatening injury from that? Talk about melodrama. I wonder who the snowflake was who typed out that quote-unquote headline. And now it's gotten even worse. The cameraman filed a police report, and Davante Adams is now being charged with misdemeanor assault. I want anybody out there, especially guys, to think back. If you're 40s, 50s, 60s in that age group, think about how many times you were shoved down, pushed to the ground on the playground, during football practice. Did you start screaming, "I want to file charges"? That's assault. We have gone way too far the other way. Powder Puff Nation is taking over, and it's scary. All right, back to the action on the field. Looking at last week's games from week 5 real quick. Of course, last Thursday night's game between the Colts and the Broncos probably set the game of football back about 50 years. It was such an abysmal showing. 12-9 in overtime. 7 field goals. Matt Ryan looked bad. Russell Wilson looked bad. Not a good look for the NFL. Now, that being said, the Colts are still clinging to life at 2-1. It's early, but you're already starting to see you've got about half a dozen teams that are really, really good, and the rest are mediocre at best. The Giants pull off surprising win in London against the Packers. Am I starting to believe in the Giants? Still can't do it. Still can't wrap my head around it. But I've said this over the last couple weeks. Their head coach, Brian Daboll, they look like they got one of those few great young head coaches out there. I like Daboll a lot. Still not sold on Daniel Jones. They have still got to purge that roster. There are a lot of bad draft picks and a lot of prima donna free agents. Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney come to mind. But they're trending in the right direction. Just when you thought the Lions were getting better, they lion all over themselves. Top offense in the league going into Foxborough to play the Patriots, who were struggling badly on their third-string quarterback. And what do the Lions do? They get shut out 29-0. So I guess we were all fooled. The Lions are who we thought they were. They're the Lions. With all the Tua Tagovailoa drama, he's back at practice now, but of course will not play this week either. Sat out last week's game against the New York Jets. Teddy Bridgewater gets knocked out, ironically with a concussion. So they're down to their third-string quarterback in Miami. The Jets put up a dominant 40-17 win against the Dolphins in New York. Tua might be coming back in another couple weeks. We'll see. But the Dolphins are going to start sliding in the standings now because of this. And, of course, the players' health and safety is paramount. Tua should not come back until he's been thoroughly vetted and checked out. Dallas Cowboys with a surprising win against the LA Rams, the defending world champions in Los Angeles at SoFi Stadium, with Cooper Rush still at the helm. That Cowboys defense, that defense is carrying that team right now, and the Rams offensive line is a mess. Micah Parsons looks fantastic. When we get to our games coming up this weekend and our picks, things might change a little bit, though. But the Dallas Cowboys looking really good right now, at least on the defensive side, at 4-1. Great game Sunday night against the Ravens and the Bengals. In Baltimore, back and forth game. Ravens on a last-second Justin Tucker field goal win 19-17. To take over first place in the AFC north. And of course, we mentioned the possibly what was the game of the week, Monday night between the Raiders and the Chiefs. So now we move on. We go from week 5 forward to this upcoming weekend, NFL week 6, and our picks. All 8 picks are in since we're taping late. All of our panelists have their selections in. Tonight, the Commanders at the Chicago Bears. We mentioned that game. Maybe a little favoritism here since a lot of our panel are Bears fans, including me. Everybody, all 8 of us, taking the Chicago Bears to beat the Commanders. All the dysfunction this week with Washington's got to be a distraction. The Bears defense isn't top tier like it has been in the past, but it's still good enough. They should be able to pressure Carson Wentz. They should be able to win this game at home. Sunday, October the 16th, the Patriots, we just talked about them shutting out the Lions, go in to play the Cleveland Browns, still with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Deshaun Watson now practicing with the team, still weeks away from actually being able to rejoin the team and play. Interesting pick. The Browns have fallen on a lot of tough luck this year. I think they've played admirably well with Brissett at quarterback. Nick Chubb has been Nick Chubb. He's been great. He proves to me each and every year when I skip him in our fantasy draft that I have to slap myself on the forehead 2 or 3 weeks into the season and go, why didn't I take Nick Chubb when I had the chance? I always look at Kareem Hunt sitting there in his shadow thinking Kareem Hunt's going to take the touches away, the touchdowns away. But every year, Kevin Stefanski finds a way for both of them to be successful. Amari Cooper's fit in pretty well as the number 1 receiver there with Cleveland. David Njoku's been good at tight end, something that's rare to find in the NFL, a good tight end outside of Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews in Baltimore. 5 of us are taking the Browns. We have 3 picks for the Patriots. Jets at Packers. Jets, as I mentioned, coming off a huge win against the Dolphins. Packers going back home after a depressing, discouraging defeat in London at the hands of the Giants. Everybody on the panel except for Jen sees a bounce back for the Green Bay Packers. She thinks the Jets are going to win this thing. I hope she's right. 7 picks for the Packers, 1 pick for the Jets. Jaguars at Colts. 2 teams that, what are you going to make of this AFC South rivalry? The Colts haven't looked good. The Jaguars looked good for a couple weeks and then fell apart. What are you going to make of Trevor Lawrence? Is Matt Ryan aging before our eyes? I picked the Colts to make it to the AFC Championship. I will stick by the Colts at least for 1 more week. But we're split. We've got 4 for the Colts, 4 for the Jaguars. Very tough game to call. Vikings going down to Miami to play the Dolphins. Dolphins, as I mentioned, 3rd-string quarterback. Kirk Cousins is not playing on a national game. I believe this is a 1 o'clock kickoff on Sunday, so he should be fine. You got Justin Jefferson. It's neck and neck with him and Cooper Kupp, who's the best receiver in the NFL. I don't like the rookie quarterback throwing to Waddle and Hill. But that being said, 5 picks for the Vikings. There are 3. Jen, Nick, and Aaron are going with the Dolphins. Bengals at Saints. I thought we might have a little bit of dissension on this one, but no. The Saints have played relatively good football as they sit at 2-3. The Bengals are 2-3, but of course they're the defending AFC champions. Still looking for them to kick it into high gear. That offense has sputtered. The offensive line has gotten a lot better over the last couple weeks. They were a sieve, and Joe Burrow was getting killed the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. Everybody taking the Bengals down in New Orleans. Ravens at the Giants. Again, Giants 4-1. Ravens on top of the AFC North at 3-2, but they've had their struggles. Lamar Jackson has looked good, come down a little bit from that early buzz about him possibly getting his second MVP award. But the Ravens are just too talented. Still trying to work J.K. Dobbins into the offense. Devin Duvernay looks like he could be a Deebo Samuel Jr. if they use him right. And I still don't believe in Daniel Jones. That Giants team just doesn't have enough talent. Even though it's on the road in New York, everybody, all 8 of us, are taking the Baltimore Ravens. Cardinals at the Seahawks. Both 2-3. Very critical game in the NFC West, as the Rams also sit at 2-3. 49ers are at 3-2, starting to really gain some traction with Jimmy G now back as the quarterback. Geno Smith has looked good. Who thought that was coming? Geno Smith, one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league so far this year. Look at the numbers. And Kyler Murray, I've learned to hate him. He's poster child for the modern, current, lazy, entitled athlete. And somehow the Cardinals decided to pay him hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think it's going to bite them in the butt. I'm taking the Seahawks at home. Better coach, and right now, better quarterback. Doug and Aaron agree with me. The 5 other panelists are going with the Arizona Cardinals. The game of the week, if not the game of the year. I said the Bills at the Rams opening night was a Super Bowl preview. Could be right, could be wrong about that. This has got to be the AFC Championship preview. Just got to go with my Super Bowl pick. Can't abandon them yet. Both of these teams are 4-1. Both look good. Both have had one stumble. Everybody but Aaron taking the Bills. He is going with the Chiefs at home. And, by the way, with the scheduling screw up this week, I'm going to go ahead and proclaim this the Dave Visick game of the week, because I know not only would he pick this because it's a good game, but because he has a fondness for the Chiefs. Cowboys at Eagles. Can't go against the Eagles until they show some weakness. I still am not a believer in Cooper Rush. While the Cowboys' defense is great, I think Jalen Hurts and that offense will figure it out enough to win in Philadelphia. The Sunday night game, Dallas at Philadelphia. All 8 of us taking the Eagles. Finally, Monday night the 17th, Broncos at Chargers. The Broncos are a mess. Nathaniel Hackett doesn't look like he deserved to get the head coaching job. I will believe in the Chargers until something happens otherwise to disprove it, and that could happen with Brandon Staley, because he could be out this year if he keeps botching his coaching decisions. But it's Justin Herbert. That's good enough for me. The only person dissenting is Jen taking the Broncos. We'll be right back with college football, kids.
This This episode of Sports Frenzy 2.0 is brought to you by the Bills Mafia Marital Aid Company, because when you are down and out, we'll bring you back up and in the game. Sports Frenzy 2.0 on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, and Stitcher.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Solo this week, the Maestro Kevin Crane here on Sports Frenzy 2.0, taping Thursday afternoon, October the 13th, 2022. This will hit Thursday night right before the Bears-Commanders game. And as always, we're available on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon, and Audible. Just not the same without Dave here. Of course, check out the Facebook page. Our NFL, college football, NASCAR picks posted each and every week, no later than Thursday night. All right, we talked about the NFL in segment 1. Segment 2 goes to college football. Local team, of course, is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They've bounced back after a rough start under Marcus Freeman. Shamrock Series game this past weekend in Las Vegas. They beat number 16 BYU 28-20. Give it another couple weeks, kids. And, of course, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish will be in the top 25 again. Ugh. I am a stranger in a strange land when it comes to the Fighting Irish, if you guys haven't figured that out by now. As a Miami Hurricanes fan, I just have an unbelievable amount of disdain for Notre Dame in terms of their athletics. Kind of hard for me to disparage them in terms of academics since I actually graduated from there. But the fan base, growing up here, I've never understood the entitlement mentality of Notre Dame fans. And then they wonder why they don't win the national title each and every year. What have we done, God? What have we done? Why can't we win? Because you don't recruit as well as Alabama and Clemson and Georgia. Weather stinks here. Not much to do. It's no fun. Speaking of my beloved Miami Hurricanes, who over the last month have decided to just rip my heart out, losing their third game in a row, this time to the North Carolina Tar Heels, 27-24. Falling now below 500, 2-3. Mario Cristobal looks just like another in a long line of pathetic, mediocre coaches. Doesn't matter how big the name is, something is wrong with the Miami Hurricanes football program. They recruit well enough. You know, the former football players, the alumni, are passionate about that team down in Coral Gables. Yet they just can never seem to get it right. This time around, it looked like we had the right quarterback with Alex Van Dyke. Now it doesn't even look like that's going to come to fruition, as he's been struggling. Before the season started, of course, he was projected to be one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks going into the NFL draft, and he has not looked even close to that level of consideration. Of course, in the polls, we keep seeing the fickle pollsters changing their minds in the AP. Of course, we haven't gotten the college football playoff poll in yet. I think we're still about 2 to 3 weeks away from that at least. Georgia now jumps back up to number 1. Alabama drops to number 3 with Ohio State sandwiched in between at number 2. Clemson is at 4. Shocking. Who would have thought a month and a half into the college football season, we'd have the top 4 teams in the nation as Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, and Ohio State. Wow, shocking. This is why college football, for the most part, bores me to tears. Of course, thoughts and prayers go out to University of Michigan assistant coach Mike Hart. Sounds like he's on the road to recovery. Sounds like he might even come back, if not for this week's game with Penn State, next week or the next game, on the sidelines as they played IU down in Bloomington, had a seizure. Had to be taken to a local medical facility. But like I said, good news is, sounds like he's okay. Sounds like he's going to be back at it in a week or two. Looking back at last week's games, week 6 in NCAA football, Brian Kelly continues to struggle in his first year as head coach of LSU after bailing on Notre Dame. Number 8, Tennessee, who's starting to really gain traction, looking really, really good under Josh Heupel. They go down to the Bayou. Almost said the swamp, but of course the swamp is really Gainesville, Florida, and we'll get to that in a second. Tennessee goes into Baton Rouge and pummels Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers 40-13. Kansas continues to impress despite the fact they lost at home to TCU. They put up a fight, which is something we haven't seen in a long, long time from Kansas on a football field. Could they be legit? Could they be for real? The polls seem to think so, because even though they lost, they stayed at number 19. They did not lose a single spot in the AP poll. Oklahoma continues their downward spiral. Embarrassed beyond belief. Hosting Texas in one of the last few Texas-Oklahoma rivalry games in the Big 12. Because, of course, both of those teams are going to be moving to the SEC. 49-0. 49-0. Texas beats Oklahoma. Cannot believe, as passionate as that fan base and the alumni are, that they're going to put up with this for much longer. Looking eerily, similarly like Nebraska. UCLA, another team. Chip Kelly might finally have figured it out here in the college ranks. Beating up on Utah 42-32. So now we ask the question, is UCLA legit? How good is Utah? Remember, Utah at the beginning of the season was in the top 10. They have struggled, and they've got another big game coming up, which we'll talk about in just a minute. We mentioned the Hurricanes falling at home to the Tar Heels. We mentioned Notre Dame winning over BYU. Another team that early on fooled us, I think, a little bit. Another Florida team. All the Florida teams, the big three at least. Miami, the Florida Gators, and the Florida State Seminoles all got off to good starts. I think they all three fooled us. All three of them fooled us. Of course, Florida State beat LSU. Florida beat Utah. Miami looked really good out of the gate with their first two wins. Now all three of them are struggling. None of them are ranked. Florida State losing a close game at North Carolina State, 19-17 this past weekend. And they've got another tough test coming as Clemson heads to Tallahassee. What happened to football, college football in Florida? Remember, 10, 15 years ago, the Hurricanes, the Seminoles, the Gators were the cream of the crop. And now at the end of the year, you're lucky if one of them is ranked in the top 25. All right, so moving on from last weekend to this weekend, NCAA Week 7. Big game in the Big Ten. Number 10, Penn State, the Nittany Lions go up to Ann Arbor to play number 5, Michigan. I think my early fears about the Michigan Wolverines have been allayed. Of course, Jim Harbaugh supposedly flirted with the Minnesota Vikings in the offseason. Right around recruiting time, I was worried that was going to affect recruiting. I thought Michigan was going to be in for a down year, and I was going to blame it all on Jim Harbaugh and his little dalliance with the Vikings. So far, no problems, and I think we're far enough removed from that now where we can say for the second year in a row, Michigan is a legit contender to make it to the college football playoff. Out of our 8 panelists, 7 agree with me that Michigan will win at home against Penn State. James Franklin hasn't been consistent enough as the head coach of the Nittany Lions for me to have any faith in him. Doug is the only one going with Penn State. We mentioned Kansas. Intriguing game here. Who would have thought you would see in Week 7 of the college football season, Kansas ranked and Oklahoma not, and Oklahoma in shambles? One of the few interesting stories in college football. That being said, I've got to believe there's got to be some kind of a bounce back for Oklahoma. They've got to have some kind of pride, don't they? And while I'm not trying to say Kansas is a pretender, I think they have played above their heads for long enough. I think they need to come back down a little bit to reality. So Sam and Bill and I are going with Oklahoma. The other 5 panelists are going with Kansas. Minnesota going in playing the surprising number 24 Illini. Brett Bielema, good coach. Looks like he's turning things around in Illinois. Minnesota was briefly ranked a few weeks back. From what I can tell, Minnesota looks like the better team. Even though it's on the road, I'm taking Minnesota. Sam is with me. So is Jen. The other 5 panelists take the Illini. Huge, huge game. One of the few times you're going to hear me outside of the Miami Hurricanes, I'm actually going to watch a college football game mid-season. Number 3, Alabama goes into play number 6, Tennessee. Yes, the upstart Tennessee Vols we just talked about a few minutes ago. Bryce Young looks like he's going to play. Huge, huge factor. Pick deadline was last night. Had to go with Alabama. We do have some Tennessee fans, though, when it comes to this game. Jen and Doug and Aaron are taking the Vols. The other 5 panelists sticking with the Crimson Tide. Number 8, Oklahoma State. At number 13, TCU. We mentioned TCU beating Kansas. How do you judge that game? How do you judge that victory? Is it impressive? Did TCU beat an overrated Kansas team? Is it time for my man, the 40, 50-year-old man with the mullet, my Gundy, to finally Gundy all over himself as he is wont to do once or twice a year when you start to believe in Oklahoma State? I'll tell you what, this is the year with Oklahoma weak. Texas, good but not great. This is the year for Oklahoma State to dominate the Big 12. If it's not this year, when is it going to happen? He'd have to wait, another couple of years, year or two, until Texas and Oklahoma leave, and then he'll probably own the Big 12 if he's still around, if he's still coaching there. So I'm going with Oklahoma State. So is Dave, Jen, and Doug. Split on this one evenly, 4-4. Sam, Bill, Nick, and Aaron go with TCU. Number 15, North Carolina State. At number 18, Syracuse. Syracuse, another one of those teams where you kind of look at them like Kansas and you go, how good is Syracuse really? They've had years in the past where they've rose up and put up a good year, but it's few and far between. Whereas NC State has been building that program slowly but surely, not necessarily into an ACC power, but into one of the better teams in the ACC. I have faith in NC State. Most of the panel agrees with me. The 2 dissenters going with Syracuse are Sam and Bill. Arkansas going to play at BYU. Of course, BYU just beat by Notre Dame. One of those teams got off to a really solid start, kind of fallen off the map. Same thing with Arkansas. Of course, Arkansas is falling victim to the fact they play in the ultra tough SEC and they just can't keep up with the competition. I'm going to believe in Arkansas for 1 week. Again, they have played unbelievably tough competition. I think when it comes to playing an independent like BYU, I think we're finally going to see that it's too hard outside of Notre Dame to sustain success as an independent. I'm going with Arkansas. So is Sam, Doug, and Aaron. But again, we're split evenly here, 4-4. Dave, Bill, Jen, and Nick go with BYU. Wisconsin at Michigan State, 2 disappointing teams in the Big Ten. Of course, Wisconsin fired Paul Chryst a few weeks back as head coach. Michigan State fell into the trap of having a successful run with a new head coach. So they gave him a massive long-term extension, and now all of a sudden they're falling apart. Sound familiar, Notre Dame fans? Sound a little bit like Charlie Weiss? Wisconsin, probably the better team. Seems like they've made a decent enough transition from Paul Chryst to the interim coach. Everybody taking Wisconsin except for Jen. She is going with the Spartans. LSU at Florida. It's very similar to the game we just discussed, except switching from the Big Ten to the SEC. LSU in Florida 5, 6, 7 years ago, if we even need to go back that far, was one of the greatest rivalries in college sports, one of the more intense rivalries. Now both programs struggling to find their identity under new head coaches. I'm going to give Brian Kelly an ounce of consideration here. I've got to believe that LSU can win one of these tough games this year with him at the helm. The only person that agrees with me is Bill, the Big Blue W. Otherwise, all of the other 6 panelists are going with the Florida Gators at home in the swamp. Number 4, Clemson, going down to Tallahassee to play Florida State. We kind of discussed Florida State here a few minutes ago, as we did with Florida and Miami, how these Florida football programs are just now year after year disappointing. And while Clemson might not be as great as they were with Deshaun Watson or with Trevor Lawrence, they're still much better than Florida State, even in Tallahassee. Everybody, all 8 of us, taking Clemson. Number 16, Mississippi State, going into play number 22, Kentucky. I don't believe in Kentucky. Like we were talking about earlier with Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State, Mike Leach here at Mississippi State will have a bad loss or two at some point in time. I don't think it's this week, and most of the panel agrees with me. The only person believing in Kentucky is Nick. Everybody else goes with Mississippi State. Huge game out west. In the Pac-12, number 7 USC at number 20 Utah. I have discussed here recently on this podcast my disdain for Utah. They have been disappointing multiple weekends in big games. Everybody seems to think, though, that they're at home on this one. They're going to rise up and beat Lincoln Riley and USC. I say no, not going to happen. Again, most of the panel agrees with me. 6 USC picks. The only 2 picks going for Utah are Bill and Doug. Finally, another game out west, San Jose State at Fresno State. We like to try to pick a nice variety of games from bigger conferences, smaller conferences. So this is kind of our pick for the week to the smaller schools, or at least outside the Power 5. San Jose State looking really good. The point spread on this game has gone up and up and up. That being said, we've got 6 picks for San Jose State, but Nick and Aaron have faith in Fresno State at home, so they're going with Fresno State. All right, that'll wrap up football for the week. Got a couple minutes here before segment 2 is done. We're going to have, of course, the NHL to talk about here as the regular season has started this past Tuesday. And, of course, I'm not a huge hockey guy, but, of course, Dave is a massive Chicago Blackhawks fan. Probably a good thing that he's not here this week because they did not start the season off very well last night as they got beat by the Colorado Avalanche. Now, of course, the Avalanche are really damn good, so let's slow the negative roll here. But I've talked to Dave about what he thinks in terms of how the Blackhawks are going to look like this year, and he does not sound optimistic. So, unfortunately, they are 0-1. In basketball, the NBA starts next week. Yay. Can hardly wait for the prima donnas of the NBA to start playing basketball. One interesting story coming out of the Golden State Warriors camp. Of course, you guys know it by now. Draymond Green punching Jordan Poole, the younger star player for the Warriors, in practice. Everybody going crazy, blowing it. I don't want to say blowing it out of proportion, but again, like the Davante Adams situation, like Troy Aikman. We talked about this on our bonus episode this week, criticizing the roughing the passer calls, saying that we've got to start taking the dresses off. Oh, how can you say that? Oh my God, that's misogynistic. Hashtag me too. Settle down. I don't believe Draymond Green punching his teammate is that big of a deal. These things happen. Again, I mentioned this earlier in the show. Anybody who's played any type of organized athletics, especially if you played back in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, it happens. Physical games, tempers flare. Stuff like this happens, and guess what you do? You shake it off, shake hands, apologize, hug it out. If you're a professional, you go grab a beer after it happens. But again, snowflake society rules. Will this fracture the Golden State Warriors? Will this drive a wedge among their players? Nah, probably the only thing it does is it's going to make the Warriors think twice about giving Draymond Green any type of a contract extension because he is a hothead, he's temperamental, but he's a disruptor like Dennis Rodman was. So you take these type of incidents and you have to weigh them with what he does on the court, how he gets into the opposing players' heads with the trash talking and the physical play. Again, I think this is being blown way out of proportion. The Warriors will be fine. The only person Draymond Green hurt by punching Jordan Poole was himself. All right, that's going to do it for segment 2. We have got a lot of NASCAR to talk about. We've got to recap the race at the Charlotte Roval and look ahead to the South Point 400 at Las Vegas this coming weekend as we get close to crowning a champion. 4 races to go in the NASCAR Cup regular season. We'll have some dumbasses for you, of course. My favorite part of the show. hang out for just a little bit longer, kids. The Maestro solo this week. I'll be right back.
Greetings, sports fans. Listen to the screaming geniuses of Sports Frenzy 2.0 every Thursday as they bring you the thrill of victory and the agony of stupidity on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Apple, Overcast, and Castbox. And check out the Facebook page, Sports Frenzy 2.0.
Welcome back to Sports Frenzy 2.0. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane, flying solo this week. Rock and roll took precedence, so the Conquistador could not join me this week, as we saw an awesome Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers concert when we would normally be taping together. He's trying to finish up his basement, finally getting the massive, awesome game room completed. I'm sure he'll have an update on that next week for you. So you're stuck with me. One more segment here, and of course, I will be alone on the weekend edition coming up this Saturday morning. Be sure to check that out. I will have my review of the new Marvel show on Disney Plus, the 1-hour special, based on one of the great Marvel horror comics from the 70s. One of my personal favorites, Werewolf by Night. I will also have a review of Dead for a Dollar, brand new Western starring Christoph Waltz and Willem Dafoe. We'll have music reviews, Smashing Pumpkins, Alter Bridge, Nickelback, and of course we'll have Hollywood dumbasses for you. But we're not done yet here. We've got NASCAR and baseball to get to before we give you some idiotic behavior in the Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. Lots to talk about in NASCAR. I covered a little bit of this in the bonus episode a few days ago. First up, Charlotte Roval. Pole went to Joey Logano. Chase Elliott led a lot of this race, as you would expect. Spun out right at the end of the race, allowing Christopher Bell to pull off the surprise win. Not really surprising that he won, but the fact that in an elimination race to take the field down from 12 to 8, with 4 races to go, he had to win. He was no way, shape, or form going to get enough points to make the cut. He had to win. And sure enough, Christopher Bell won, knocking out last year's champion, Kyle Larson, in the process. Now, there was some hinky stuff. NASCAR has really done a bad job this year in terms of legislating penalties. Again, as I mentioned a couple days ago in the bonus episode, Stewart-Haas Racing getting hammered. Talladega penalty for Kevin Harvick and his crew chief Rodney Childers. They have dropped their appeal. So they will lose 100 driver points, 100 owner points, and Rodney Childers will have to pay a $100,000 fine, and he is suspended for 4 races. The unapproved part modification was the deck lid. Now, of course, Stewart-Haas Racing has turned around and appealed the other penalty I discussed, which comes from the Charlotte Roval race. Cole Custer was accused of slowing up the field to try to help out Chase Briscoe. That penalty is now under appeal. But here's where I get upset. William Byron got penalized for his actions at the Texas race. He appealed it, went through another race, the Talladega race, as I recall. Everybody thought William Byron had gone from above the cut line to below the cut line because he had gotten a 25-point driver penalty. Well, after the Talladega race, NASCAR rescinds the 25-point penalty. So going into the Roval now, all of a sudden, these teams are scrambling, having to set up new strategy because now William Byron has jumped back up into the top 8, pushing everybody, of course, below him down to more precarious positions when it came to the cut line. My problem with this is simple. Don't assess the penalty if there is any doubt you're going to be able to uphold it, because you're going to cause a chaotic mess like what you did with William Byron. He's in the top 8, he's out of the top 8, he's in the top 8. You mess with other teams' strategies, other teams' way of thinking in terms of how they have to approach the Charlotte Roval race and how they approach Talladega. Very, very disappointed in NASCAR. Very disappointed in NASCAR for this whole situation. It looks like 2311 Racing has bought out Tyler Reddick's last year with Childress, so Tyler Reddick will indeed be joining 2311 next year in 2023 instead of 2024, as was originally planned and reported. Still wonder what that means for Kurt Busch's future. Of course, he has been out pretty much the last third of the season with a concussion. I just wonder if this means Kurt Busch is going to retire. Of course, he's not the only driver suffering with concussion-like symptoms. Alex Bowman, who was in the playoffs, has missed multiple races and now will be out at least until the series finale in Phoenix. And then, of course, you have talks with Dodge stalling as NASCAR tries to bring in a fourth manufacturer. Look like things were moderately promising to bring Dodge in, but now not looking so good. Rick Hendrick has given Kyle Larson permission to attempt the Indy 500 Coca-Cola 600 double. Again, be interesting to see how this plays out. Indy has pushed back their start time over the years to make pulling off the double a lot more difficult. Somebody's got to know something here that we don't. Either Indy's going to go back to their earlier start time, or NASCAR is going to push back the start of the Coca-Cola 600, because it's just almost unfeasible to think that a driver could finish the Indy 500, hop in a helicopter, get down to Charlotte, and be ready to go for the start of the Coke 600. There have got to be some changes somewhere in the schedule. And of course, we talked recently about how Kyle Busch is thinking about attempting the double as well. NASCAR continuing to discuss tweaking their schedule, adding new markets. Now they're talking about looking at the Pacific Northwest, possibly a track in Seattle or Portland, Oregon, in addition to a street race in New York City. For a sport that everybody thinks is struggling, and how they try to, with this new next-gen car, keep costs down, NASCAR seems to be pretty flush when it comes to money in terms of how much they've invested in the new Clash race at the LA Coliseum, all the work that's got to go into turning Bristol into a dirt track for one race, and now how they're talking about possibly helping to build new tracks in the Northwest. Doesn't sound like they're really hurting for money. Switching over to F1 real quick before we make our picks for the South Point 400 at Las Vegas. I have complained about the playoff system in NASCAR, how they try to force a football mentality, a baseball or basketball mentality in terms of playoffs into their sport, which isn't conducive to the type of sport it is. Manufactured drama and penalizing consistent drivers. Because remember, years and years ago, the problem was Matt Kenseth won a championship when he didn't really win races, but he was a consistent top 3, top 5 driver and accumulated points so that he won a championship, even though he really didn't win that much. I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was fine. I thought it was the best, purest way to crown a champion in racing. Look at F1. This might be the reason why NASCAR went to the current playoff system. Max Verstappen has now officially won the F1 title this year, and there are still 4 races left on the F1 schedule. So you've pretty much sucked all the drama out of the end of the F1 season. Again, I didn't mind when Matt Kenseth won the Cup in NASCAR being consistent. Then again, if something like this happened where the last couple, 2-3 races of the season, in this case 4 races, were rendered inconsequential, if I was running the sport, I might have a problem with it. And I might try to find ways to tweak it to make things more exciting, to keep people going to the races and watching on TV. That being said, we move on to the start of the 3rd round of the NASCAR Cup playoffs, the South Point 400 at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, this coming Sunday, October the 16th, 2022. Now we've got 3 more races before we narrow the field down from 8 to 4, and then we have an even all-out 1-race shootout for the title at Phoenix. And it all starts here. We've got 7 of our 8 panelists still participating in our Frenzy Cup competition. Aaron, of course, is our current leader. He is taking Denny Hamlin for Las Vegas. Dave's in second place. He is taking Joey Logano. I'm going with Kyle Larson, even though he's been eliminated. The Big Blue W, Bill is going with Kevin Harvick, again, eliminated. Ran very well at the Roval, finishing second, by the way. Mrs. C, Jen is taking William Byron. Nick, who drives me absolutely crazy because he doesn't pay enough attention to what's going on in NASCAR, wanted to pick Alex Bowman. I told him He's probably going to be out with a concussion. Pick somebody else. So he picked Kurt Busch. Yeah. Well, I had to tell him again, make another pick. So Nick's going with Brad Keselowski. Am I not the nicest guy in the world or not? I could have been an absolute jerk and let him hang out there with one of those two picks. And he's tried to take Kurt Busch previously when he was out with a concussion as well. I am such a nice guy. And finally, Doug is taking Ross Chastain. All right, moving on to baseball. Of course, we are now into the AL and NLDS divisional series. The Mariners and the Astros are playing game 2 of their series as I tape this podcast episode. The Yankees and the Guardians, game 2 of their series that was supposed to be played tonight in New York has been rained out, will be played Friday afternoon. Houston currently up 1-0 against the Mariners. Of course, in the name of greed, after the initial 4 games that were played on Tuesday to start off the divisional series, Major League Baseball decided, well, let's start splitting things up now so we don't have 4 games on one day. Let's go 2 and 2. So there's baseball on every day. And, of course, that hosed the Yankees and the Guardians. If they'd played yesterday, it wasn't a travel day. Keep that in mind. They would have been able to get game 2 in with no problem. But, of course, weather is miserable now in New York, and they're creating all sorts of problems for the rest of that series. On the National League side, Philadelphia and Atlanta evened up at 1 game apiece. They're having a travel day today. They will resume tomorrow. San Diego was able to even things up with the Dodgers. They are also at 1 game apiece. Can I just ask you guys something? Why is it such a fascination with the sports media, ESPN, whoever's covering the games, TBS, the fascination with the fact that there was a goose on the field late in the game in the Padres-Dodgers matchup? This happens all the time. We see cats running on the field, squirrels. Of course, infamously, Hall of Famer Randy Johnson one time threw a fastball that pegged a seagull and killed it. And I think it's funny. I'm sorry, PETA. I think it's hysterical. These things happen. People, creatures die in freak, stupid, tragic accidents. So all I see this morning after I wake up is coverage of the goose that took up residence on the field during the San Diego Dodgers game. Who cares? Jesus, God. That's how boring baseball is they got to focus more on a goose on the field than on the actual game itself. Baseball is in such serious trouble. I'll be interested to see what the ratings are for the playoffs this year. Very interested. Then finally, on a tragic note, in a way tragic. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not very sympathetic when it comes to drug users. People need help. People should have help available to them, affordable help. But there are times when it goes too far and you realize you're just not going to be able to help somebody. Now, Los Angeles Angels pitcher Tyler Skaggs, of course, we know, died of a drug overdose. A bad combination of drugs. The person who supplied those drugs to Tyler Skaggs, his name is Eric Kay. Former Los Angeles Angels employee, was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison for his part in the death of Tyler Skaggs. Now, if there's anybody worse than a drug addict, it is a drug dealer or a drug supplier. The worst part about this, Eric Kay didn't necessarily have to get a 22-year sentence. It came about because the judge was presented with evidence that while being held in prison for the trial, recorded comments on the phone portrayed Eric Kay as a man with no remorse, basically denigrating Tyler Skaggs, portraying his family as, in a way, greedy and that they were going to get more money out of a civil settlement or a lawsuit through the Angels than Tyler Skaggs would have ever earned playing baseball because he wasn't any good. Now, I'm paraphrasing that, but that's pretty close to the point in terms of what Eric Kay was saying. No remorse showed, stupidity showed in not realizing his conversations on a prison phone were going to be recorded and used against him. So the judge said, I'm tacking on 2 years because you've shown an unbelievably pathetic lack of remorse for what you did. That's the way the criminal justice system should work. Now, of course, Tyler Skaggs passed away a while ago. And luckily, we do not have any moments of silence this week on Sports Frenzy in terms of the sports world. So we will move on. If Eric Kay wasn't dumb enough, and definitely if it wasn't for the fact the story was more important than just a simple notification at the end of Sports Frenzy, he definitely would have been one of our dumbasses of the week. But I've got 4 other ones for you. Once again, going to baseball. Self-promotion for these networks when it comes to touting their shows during sports broadcasts, because, of course, your sports broadcasts are going to bring in the biggest audience. So what better time to cross-promote your other shows, maybe on the same network, maybe on another network that the company as a whole owns? What could have been more painful than an awful, awkward promo during the first game of the Yankees-Guardians series on TBS for HBO Max's House of the Dragon? Number one, the game featured Bob Costas, the most arrogant, pretentious jackass in the history of sports broadcasting. But he's not above selling out if his contract tells him he has to. So he has to be involved in this whole situation where he says, oh, we heard the game almost wasn't played, and we're going to go down to our on-field reporter to explain why. And then it goes into this whole bizarre description of a dragon almost disrupted the game here in New York City. Be sure to check out House of the Dragon on HBO Max. Good Lord. Who was the dumbass who thought that this was a good idea? I'll include Bob Costas in this just because he wakes up in the morning, he's a dumbass, even though he thinks he's the smartest man in the world. I'm surprised he didn't break into a soliloquy about climate change or gun control in the middle of the New York-Cleveland game. So, if dragons and geese in baseball weren't enough, how about glistening ears? The Mets manager, Buck Showalter, gets awarded a Red Foreman Dumbass of the Week medal because, of course, even though his team won over 100 games this year in the regular season, they choked away the National League East title to the Atlanta Braves as they got swept in a crucial 3-game series over the last weekend. Then they get dropped to the wild card best-of-3 round. And in the third game, tied 1-1, they're getting blown out by the Padres. Joe Musgrove is pitching a gem for the Padres, dominating the Mets, only allowing 1 hit. But Buck Showalter, who I normally like and respect as a manager, but he's starting to get a history of getting teams to a certain level of success, but no further, almost like the NFL equivalent of Marty Schottenheimer. So Buck Showalter, the Mets are flailing. They're about ready to choke away this best-of-3 wild card series at home to the Padres. Decides to demand that the umpires check Joe Musgrove's ears because they're glistening. He thinks that he might be using some kind of a foreign substance, and that's why he's pitching so well. So then we're subjected to watching an umpire rub his hands all over and behind the ears of Joe Musgrove. Guess what? Joe Musgrove was fine. He wasn't cheating. He was just dominating the New York Mets. So, Buck Showalter, you are a dumbass for that desperate, pathetic move to try to save face as your New York Mets choked yet again. We mentioned the whole mess with Davante Adams, now being charged with misdemeanor assault for shoving a cameraman after the Monday night game in Kansas City. That whole situation in and of itself would warrant a mention here in the dumbass segment, but somehow it gets worse. We talked about shameless self-promotion with Bob Costas and TBS and House of the Dragon. Well, how about this for self-promotion? A little-known amusement park outside of Kansas City decides to try to make a name for themselves after the Monday night game. Worlds of Fun And again, I realize I'm kind of being a hypocrite here because I'm actually giving them some kind of publicity. Worlds of Fun bans Davante Adams from their park after he shoves that cameraman at Arrowhead Stadium. Again, there's got to be a limit to whoring yourself out. There are times when it's better to just stay away from a situation. Don't try to take advantage of it. It's kind of like the social media rule, the Twitter rule, the Facebook rule. When you think you've got a good idea, step back for 5 or 10 minutes, really think it through before you go forward. 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to back off. If you're angry, you're going to cool down. And if you've got a dumbass idea like Worlds of Fun banning Davante Adams from your amusement park, maybe you would have thought better. The New England Patriots have a quote-unquote museum at Gillette Stadium where they have memorabilia. There's a gentleman who had a rare piece of memorabilia. The last game the Patriots played in their old stadium, they flew 4 American flags, one every quarter during that game. This gentleman was lucky enough to get one of those 4 flags. It had an emblem on it, a decal sewn on it, commemorating the fact that it was one of those 4 flags. So that in and of itself makes it something of a valuable commodity. Now, on top of that, he got Tom Brady to sign it. And the signature was authenticated. So it becomes a very, very, very valuable collector's item. Turns out this guy has discussion with this Patriots Hall of Fame, quote-unquote, museum, and they come to an agreement where they're going to display this flag. I don't know, take it off the guy's hands so he doesn't have to worry about somebody breaking in and stealing it, and he doesn't have to get a safe deposit box. I don't know. Now, the owner of the flag is partially to blame here and is part of the dumbass situation because he did not insist on any type of insurance. So the Patriots Hall of Fame displays the flag, and it turns out they were displaying everything, all their memorabilia, improperly. They were not a quote-unquote museum. They did not have museum standards for display. The lighting they used, the cases they used were not museum standard because, of course, an actual museum knows. This is why you go into a museum and they tell you no flash photography. There are certain things, certain types of light that will damage many, many items, paintings, and signatures on flags. So because this Patriots Hall of Fame improperly ended up displaying this guy's Tom Brady signed flag, the signature faded away to the point where it devalued the flag incredibly. So now, of course, in our litigious society, a lawsuit is pending. I believe the guy is suing for $1 million. And if you look at pictures online, you can see he's got a case in the Tom Brady signature was miserably faded due to the display methods used. And he was assured they had museum quality display techniques. But Again, he didn't get insurance, so part of this is on him. So there's dumbasses all around. It's just one of those situations that we like to call here on Sports Frenzy a dumbass clusterfuck. Finally, to wrap up Sports Frenzy 2.0 here on October the 13th, 2022. This story's been floating around for a couple weeks. I've been trying to avoid it, but I can't any longer because now, just like with Davante Adams, just like with Eric K., the legal system has become involved. So when you do something so heinously stupid that you're getting charged in a court of law, I think that's the time to bring it up in the Red Foreman Dumbasses of the Week. Jacob Runyon and Chase Kaminsky. These are the fish cheaters. If you haven't heard the story, one of the two or three of you out there who haven't heard this, in a big fishing tournament in Lake Erie a couple weeks ago, Mr. Runyon and Mr. Kaminsky shoved weights, lead weights, and fish fillets into the fish they caught so they would be heavier. And of course, you win the tournament based on the weight of your catch. So the people that had gathered there to witness the weighing of their collective catch, I am a bit naive when it comes to the ways of fishing competitions, but I do know that usually it's got more to do with the weight than the number of fish you catch. If I'm wrong, I apologize to the fishing community. Obviously, the people that were gathered here at this event knew their stuff, because what happened was they proceed with the weighing of the fish, and based on the size of the fish, everybody in the audience, everybody in the crowd knew that these fish weighed way too damn much based on how big they were. And the official or one of the judges got the same impression, ended up cutting the fish open, and they pull out the weights, the fillets. Crowd gets into a massive uproar, bordering on a riot. You know, I guess these fishing people are pretty hardcore. So anyway, now it has come out. And this is why, again, I finally decided to mention this on the Red Foreman segment, is because considering where the money came from, the entry fees from all the other contestants is what goes into the prize money that these gentlemen, Runyon and Kaminsky, tried to defraud everybody out of. They have been charged with multiple counts of fifth-degree felonies. I have no problem with it. Runyon and Kaminsky are very, very disgusting human beings. To cheat like this, we've talked about cheating here recently. Yes, I'm not going to mention the chess cheating again, you know, the vibrating anal beads. Oops. Sorry, guess I did it again. But these two fishermen are just disgusting cheats, worthy of the final Red Foreman Dumbasses of the Week award here on October the 13th, 2022. And that is going to do it here for my little solo jaunt here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. Check out the weekend edition coming up this Saturday morning, October the 15th. Werewolf by Night, Dead for $1. Plenty to talk about when it comes to new rock and roll music. of course, pretentious Hollywood dumbasses to discuss. Glad you hung out with me this week. As always, hope it was as fun for you as it was for me. We will check you out this weekend. And then for sports, Dave will be back for next Thursday morning's episode. Take care, everybody.